If I have a persistent cough in 2026, you'll know that it didn't go well finding a new healthcare program.
Feel like, is it healthcare or is it COVID?
Well, lack of healthcare, or is it COVID? Welcome to Millennial, the home of pretend adulting and real talk. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
So we got to get started this week by talking about, the big bullshit, beautiful, awful, terrible, no good, very bad bill. Because we want to talk about the timeline on this thing. As y'all probably all know, the House ended up passing the Senate's version of the big, beautiful bill. So it is going to go into law. However, it's not all going to go into effect immediately. Things are going to be kind of staggered. And there are some things in this that are advertised as like perks or like tax breaks for the middle class. We can talk about why that is in a moment here. But I just wanted to talk through some of the stuff that'll be coming up. One of the big things that's going to be happening soon is that there are going to be changes to work requirements for SNAP, which is supplemental meal assistance for people who can't necessarily afford to get the best quality, most nutritious food available to them. Not only are these work requirements going to add a lot more paperwork for people trying to sign up for this, they're also going to be shifting 5% of the budget onus for SNAP to the states. Previously, SNAP has been 100% federally funded. So this is going to be a big change. And when you're looking at states that are already getting funding cuts, it's going to hit even harder. But I wanted to talk on the no tax on overtime and no tax on tips. Has anyone in your personal lives been excited about this?
No, I feel like I would have followed this more in my barista days, but I don't get tips anyway.
And because there is a cap on this, it's less enticing, I think, than most people were looking forward to. That said, I guess it is better than nothing.
Yeah. So the thing is, they didn't advertise it as having a cap. That's the thing that I think a lot of people missed. Because
that was less sexy, Laura.
Right.
Less tax on tips.
Yes, the campaign rhetoric was no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. And that's how they're still advertising this. But it's a $25,000 cap on tips and a $12,500 cap for overtime. And by the way, this isn't going to change anyone's paycheck. The government is still going to collect taxes from your paycheck. You have to claim these deductions when you go to file your taxes next spring. So you're not necessarily going to see more money in your paycheck. You're going to see the benefit of it come tax time when your bill comes due. So definitely folks who are listening alongside us, or, if you're listening after the fact and you want to email in and let us know, I genuinely am curious to know if people see some benefit to this policy that's been enacted for no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. Because even though it's not exactly what was described, like, I could still see maybe some people seeing the benefit to it.
Right. And there still are some places in the United States where they incorporate tips into your minimum wage. And so if you live in a place like that, I would specifically be curious to hear from you if you know of somebody that feels like this is really going to help them out. It doesn't happen in California, but I know that in other places it still does. They just assume that tips will make up the rest of your minimum wage bottom line. So
yeah, that's how it is here.
Really? Still?
Oh yeah, I think
so. People are paid like $6 an hour or something like that, and they just assume that the rest will be. Yeah, sometimes it's less. Sometimes it's like $3.
It's like $2.
Yeah,
it's really low. And the other thing that I find interesting about this, full disclosure, I've never worked as a server. I've never worked in a job where I would have collected tips, but I have a lot of friends in the service industry, and my understanding is that people prefer cash tips when at all possible so that they don't have to claim them, which also makes me wonder how this works, because in order to get the deduction, you have to claim it, right?
So this is what I was thinking, that they were that basically they were passing this in an effort to get more people to be more honest about how much money they make in terms of tips. But I feel like most service industry places now, like they ask you to, like, even if you get cash tips, like you put it into a pool and then they divide it up amongst everybody.
Yeah.
So that, like, say like the host also gets a cut, even if they're not serving, or like the busboy also gets a cut. So it's tricky all around, because I think that there have been strides made for like the employer to basically report more accurately. Every job I've ever worked in coffee that has had tips, like I would say like 99% of them, the tip is just added into your paycheck, and it's, it goes in electronically. So you can look on your pay stub like how much you worked versus how much tips you made.
I feel like an uphill battle here, though, is that with so many people using credit cards or debit cards these days over cash, it's going to have to be reported. It's going to be running through those credit card systems. There's going to be no hiding it. Whereas, I mean, maybe we all should start carrying a little more cash to tip people so they could collect it under the table if they so choose. But that's what I'm saying.
Like, even if you tip cash, you don't know if that place is like, if that has to go into a pool, or if that waiter gets to keep it themselves. Yeah, most places now, even at Starbucks, like they just collect all the tip money and then they divvy it up.
Okay.
Well, there are a couple of other things coming that I think, well, at least one thing that I think people will like. So they've increased the state and local tax deduction to $40,000. That's up from the current $10,000 limit. That's being able to take your deduction for itemizing your state and local taxes with your federal taxes and getting that tax credit. So $40K sounds like a really good deduction, but it's going to reset to $10,000 in 2030. So this is a very similar bait and switch that they did with the first Trump tax bill. So kind of seeing some repetition there. But Andrew, I think a couple of things that are going to irritate you in particular are the removal of green energy credits coming later this year. So specifically on September 30th, you will no longer get an energy tax credit for purchasing an energy efficient vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, those were put in place to encourage people to buy EVs, to buy solar, and now that's going away. I actually got an email from Tesla today. The federal tax credit ends September 30th. And it's just wild seeing that email come from Tesla, whose CEO is Elon Musk, who was in the White House, who was buddy-buddy with Trump for a few months. And now look where we're standing. My business, Tesla, is going to be severely impacted by a Trump decision. Elon failed in that regard. And he was vocally mad about this federal tax credit going away. This isn't just bad news for Tesla. This is bad news for all EV makers. This is bad news for the environment. Those were great incentives. You could get $7,500 off the purchase of your EV vehicle immediately. That was a recent change in the last year or two. It wasn't something you got a credit on come tax time. This was more recently a discount at point of purchase. So it's a bummer. Solar is pretty expensive. I haven't purchased it myself, as tempting as it is, but it's expensive. And now these credits are going away, whether you're looking for solar or electric vehicle, and it's going to discourage people from buying these things.
I was just going to ask if this affected solar. I know that at least my family in Texas was trying to convince our family to do solar, and we were also saying like it's really expensive to get that installed. And they were saying that at least in Texas, there are a lot of programs that, like, because they want to encourage green energy, they basically help subsidize the cost for people.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that a lot of that, like, we could not take advantage of that because there was nothing like that here in California. But I'm sure that that's probably going to go away too in a lot of states. And, with the price, at least like as far as I can only speak for PG&E because they're my energy provider. The bill last month was astronomical for off season. Like it hasn't been that hot. It's been like the surge pricing that they're doing, the flex pricing is insane. It was over $300.
Yeah.
And I don't live in a big house.
At least in red states, these state EV credits will be going away, or solar credits will be going away. You have to imagine. But I know like in New Jersey, there's solar credits. It varies state by state. I will say, if I knew the current house I'm in was my forever home, I probably would get solar. But it doesn't make sense to invest in solar if you're going to be moving out of this house in 5 to 10 years from now. It's
or
just
if
cheaper
your
to
energy
continue paying
company
electric bills.
is changing the way that they buy back the credit, because that's basically how it works, right? Like you sell the solar to the energy company, and then it knocks off money from your bill,
like your excess solar.
Exactly. That's how it works, cool. At least for PG&E, from what I understand. But it's really like the way that PG&E is charging customers, it really kind of feels like they're trying to make it obsolete. So it doesn't even really make sense in terms of your bottom line. It's getting harder and harder to penny pinch, even if you want to do it in a way that helps like the environment and in the world overall. So it's too bad.
Well, Andrew, I have some more bad news for you. The Affordable Care Act enhanced premium tax credits are set to expire at the end of 2025. The presumable plan for a Democratic administration would have been to extend them, but they are not being extended as part of this bill. So these premium tax credits given to the states effectively are one of the tools that help prioritize subsidizing your ACA health plans. So for you and anyone else who is on a plan that you purchased on the marketplace, this will affect you.
Yeah, I got a nice little refund last year. I want to say around $400. I think tied to this enhanced premium tax credit. So it's a bummer I won't be seeing that anymore.
Yeah.
And also my healthcare is ending at the end of this year. So that's stressful.
Right, because you already
have to buy again.
You shared some of that
a new company
with us recently, right? You're going to have to be shopping around on the market again. You'll have to keep us posted on how it goes.
Yeah.
I guess the good thing is that open enrollment is kind of coming up. It usually happens in the fall, right?
Yeah.
Like
if
November.
I have a persistent cough in 2026, you'll know that it didn't go well finding a new healthcare program.
Feel like, is it healthcare or is it COVID?
Well, lack of healthcare, or is it COVID?
And it could be both, because didn't they also say that they were going to remove the the government isn't going to subsidize the cost for the COVID vaccine anymore, so you're going to have to pay out of pocket.
Probably.
If you want
They're
it.
done with free tests as well.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to 2026, this is where we're going to start getting Medicaid work requirements. And something I just want to highlight here is that health policy experts say that the population of able-bodied Americans on Medicaid who don't work is actually fairly small, but that many more people might end up losing their coverage because of all of the extra paperwork and requirements that are being added with the requirement to regularly prove work status. So this is another example of them, trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist and trying to create a wedge issue that really doesn't exist. And it's just going to make it a lot harder for people who are under-resourced and disabled and poor. It's going to start stacking up really fast. And also wanted to call out that next year, automatic renewals of Affordable Care Act plans are going to be canceled. And those shopping on the marketplace are going to be subjected to even more paperwork. So Andrew, again, I'll just ask you to keep us posted on that. And then Andrew, something that you actually drew my attention to was some changes around student loans. And this really sucks for student loan borrowers. Not only are they going to have fewer repayment options under this mega bill, but current students who are enrolled are going to find themselves between a rock and a hard place because they've placed lifetime caps on student loans, without actually addressing the cost of higher education. So if you think about people who are in school right now, in medical school, who've just been told that they have a $200,000 cap on the graduate loans they can take out to be a doctor. Do you know how much debt people take on to become doctors?
Yeah.
There's no way that kind of limit fixes this problem. It just makes it harder, again, for poor people to access those resources so that they can benefit from those programs too. And then, looking ahead, and we'll keep an eye on all of this, but it was funny to me. So under Biden, there were some new requirements introduced for Medicaid that would actually make it easier for people to determine their Medicaid eligibility, to kind of promote faster enrollment processes. And that was supposed to start this year or next year. This bill delays it until 2035. So we're not only gutting Medicaid funding, but we are actively going to make it harder for people to sign up. So it's just a lot of really, really bad stuff, if I'm being honest, with like a couple of, they threw people a bone, I guess, they think, on the OT and the tax, or the OT and the tips stuff. But those benefits only last until 2028. So as soon as Trump's done with his term, so are those tax breaks, unless they're extended.
I seem to remember Kamala Harris was thinking about this no tax on tips idea, but Trump ultimately beat her to it. I think the Dems will want to continue pursuing this because it seems, it's a talking point that's easy for everybody to understand, and it genuinely benefits everyday Americans, at least to some degree.
I agree with you. I think Dems are too shy about doing this because Republicans don't care. Republicans steal Democratic ideas all the time and try to put their own spin on it. Dems should do the same thing. Like, it is not 2008 anymore. We got to fight fire with fire at this point.
And it's a good line. No tax on tips. No tax on tips. It's some tax on tips, but no tax on tips.
Right.
I mean, this bill was also polling pretty badly as well in the lead up to the actual vote on it. And it's just generally pretty unpopular.
Yeah. I mean,
no matter how many times Trump
I
called
gotta
it beautiful.
tell you, when Hakeem Jeffries was doing his 8-hour not filibuster of this, I was actively calling Republican Congress people from Georgia to just voice my concerns and encourage them to vote no, even though I knew they wouldn't. But I gotta say, half their lines were busy. And usually when you try calling a member of Congress and you can't get through because the line's busy, it means their office is getting blown up by phone calls, metaphorically. I feel like I have to choose my words there carefully.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But, again, I think it goes to show that even in a state like Georgia that flip-flopped back to red, people are still pretty upset about this.
Yeah. Well, that's what's happening there. And a couple of other updates. Just want to say that our hearts go out to everyone in Texas who is affected by this horrible flooding that occurred about a week ago. It was reported today, Tuesday, that over 160 people are still missing. And that's on top of the over 100 people whose bodies have already been found. So just a horrific story that keeps getting worse. And, sorry to bring politics into it, but it is an important reminder that sometimes big government is actually a good thing. There's been talk from Trump in recent weeks and recent months that he wants to dismantle FEMA. He was asked about that this week, and he said, "Oh, now's not the time to talk about it."
Yeah,
no shit,
bet
because
it's not.
FEMA is super helpful right now. Also, the National Weather Service was understaffed. He has been gutting the National Weather Service too. And this is an important reminder that we need the National Weather Service. We need people working who send out alerts and can warn people. The alerts came too late in the case of these floods.
Yeah, but if they have alerts, and by the way, hurricane season is like upon us. If they have too many alerts, then that means they would know if a hurricane is going to hit the Everglades, and they would have to, do the responsible thing and evacuate those people. But for some reason, I don't think they want to.
Right. In the Timeline's collapsing department, another update on the Diddy trial. He was found guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution after that 8-week trial. He faces up to 10 years in prison on each count. He was acquitted of the more serious charges of which he was accused: racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. And my understanding is that the prosecution was not running a good case when it came to those charges, and that's why he got off of those. Did you see his fans, by the way, who were partying in the street after, like, literally pouring baby lotion on themselves?
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like,
oh my God.
It was so
people-
gross.
That's wild.
And one last note about Trump: his Department of Justice backpedaled on releasing the Epstein list after they promised they would be doing so. And a lot of people on the right, including Tucker Carlson, are mad about this because they were promised a big, beautiful list of names and it wasn't released. Very interesting, because Trump has been suspected to be one of the people who was on this list.
Yeah. And they're over here like, Jeffrey who?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I know. Yeah.
I barely know him. Like,
Yeah. The MAGA Republicans are fighting against each other again, so at least that's good to see.
Let's talk about some music news. We haven't talked about music in a while, and specifically we're going to talk about kind of something that's concert etiquette adjacent. So we've talked, I feel like, briefly before about the idea of banning phones at concerts, but this topic came up again recently because Sabrina Carpenter had something to say about it. She is on the cover of Rolling Stone last month to promote her upcoming new album. And in that feature, she talked about how she actually wouldn't be against banning phones from concerts to make things better in terms of the experience overall. And she did also preface that by saying that her fans would probably hate her for saying that. But she went on to explain that she had recently gone to Silk Sonic's Vegas residency, which is notoriously no phones allowed. It's very swanky. It's in a lounge from what I hear. And she said the experience really altered her viewpoint on whether or not cell phones should even be allowed at concerts to begin with. She said, quote, "I've never had a better experience at a concert. I genuinely felt like I was back in the 70s, wasn't alive, genuinely felt like I was there. Everyone's singing, dancing, looking at each other and laughing. It really, really just felt so beautiful." And then later she added, "I can't blame people for wanting to have memories, but depending on how long I want to be touring and what age I am, girl, take those phones away. You cannot zoom in on my face. Right now, my skin is soft and supple. It's fine. Do not zoom in on me when I'm 80 years old up there."
Well, girl,
So
get better makeup and use Botox. You'll be
got a
fine.
good sense of humor about it. But she does bring up a really good point. I never really thought about like the connection aspect of this, which I think it's a really compelling argument. I think usually when we're talking about this, we're just talking about how annoying it is if like your view is obstructed by somebody's cell phone, or how bright it is if somebody has their flash on because they want to record themselves. But the act of bringing back the community aspect, I think is a really compelling argument that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, and you mentioned this Silk Sonic show is in a lounge, so I can see why a lounge, a small space, would feel very intimate, and it would make it feel like a communal experience if everybody's gathered in this small space without their phones and just living in the moment. That is cool. I get it from a small space angle. I get it on Broadway too. The theater, relatively small compared to like an arena or a football stadium where other concerts are held. But Sabrina Carpenter also lives a very charmed life in which she has lots of great experiences and doesn't need to brag that she's doing these things on social media. Whereas the common folk, we use these posts on social to kind of prove to people that we have an exciting life, because we need to validate our lives and justify the money that we're spending on these tickets. And part of that process is posting about something on social media sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. Go on, Laura.
Oh, I was going to say, I also feel like it's much easier said to do this in a small, intimate environment like a lounge, but Sabrina Carpenter is over here doing stadium shows. Like, I don't understand how that environment could be made to feel as close-knit, community-driven as like her lounge experience. I don't know. I feel like
No, that's right.
It's a different context entirely.
Well, supposedly Bob Dylan, Adele, and Madonna are a few of the larger artists who have actually tried doing this with varying degrees of success. I think it's probably harder than people think it is to get done, to your point about how it's different if you're trying to prohibit cell phones in a smaller lounge versus in a stadium. But, I guess if Madonna can do it, that's pretty impressive because she's huge.
We have talked about the safety angle as well before, and Lydia's bringing that up in our Discord right now. She said this is a tough one. A comedian was doing a show in DC and a flash flood alert went off during the show. No phones for hours in this age can be unsafe. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about that before in terms of schools wanting to take phones away from students as well. So there's a lot more nuance to this for sure. I do want to circle back to what you were saying, Andrew, about how most of us lead boring, mundane lives. And so we want to be able to prove that we did exciting things.
Not me, of course, but I'm speaking for the common folk.
Of course. But I think that you raise a good point because I do think a huge reason why people are so into going to concerts nowadays is like, first of all, we're all like rabid after being locked up for like a year, right? Then that's still like a byproduct of the pandemic. But second of all, it's trendy to go to these more popular concerts, and people make it into a social event for themselves. They document like getting the right themed outfit and like getting to the venue and like being there with their friends and their experience watching the show. So I think a lot of people really do just buy these tickets to create social moments for themselves, whether that's on TikTok or on Instagram.
Definitely.
And I do kind of wonder if the demand for concert tickets would kind of simmer back down to a normal pre-pandemic level if bigger artists like Sabrina said, hey, like, actually, I'm going to do a stadium tour, but surprise, you can't bring your cell phones. Like, would as many people actually want to go?
Well, it's a good question
for those pit tickets
to ask ourselves, too. For example, Beyonce is coming through at the end of this month. I was looking at tickets earlier today. They're a pretty penny, but I haven't seen Beyonce in like 10 years. I would like to see Cowboy Carter. Gaga's here like the week before. Pretty exciting week in Vegas, but I've seen Gaga a few times in the last 10 years, whereas Beyonce I haven't seen. So I really want to see the Cowboy Carter tour. If she was banning phones, and by banned phones, I think what we're talking about here is they make you put your phone in a bag that you can't open until the end of it. That would probably impact my purchase decision because yes, if I'm going to spend, minimum $100 to see Beyonce, I want to take a photo or two and probably post it on social media from the events. That's what a lot of people want to do. It's part of the experience. You take pictures with your friends at the concert too. I mean, you're robbing people of capturing precious moments with their friends or loved ones as well. I think maybe these artists should be thinking about that.
Yeah. I also just think that like the core of the reason why we're having this conversation is because the documentation has gotten out of hand. There are some people that just have their phone out the entire show. And I get it. If like, if it's your first concert, you maybe don't know like what you should record or how much you should or shouldn't. But like in the age of social media, you're going to be able to find almost every performance from your specific show online after anyway. So it's better if like, if you're going to take just like the chorus of your favorite songs that you want to tape that, I think that's great, or
agreed.
or like, a picture with your friends, for example, like that's different. But like, I remember like at the Eras tour, the girls in front of me, I swear to God, like they spent more time filming themselves than they did actually watching Taylor.
Yeah. They're living through their phone. They're experiencing the show through their phone, which you can also do at home. You just tune into somebody's Instagram Live who's streaming it from the concert. Were you thinking like Gen Z, Pam?
Yeah, they were probably Gen Z. Yeah.
Younger than you for sure.
Yeah,
presumably.
not by much, but like they were younger. And I just think that it's like, it was just really funny because it wasn't like they weren't taking video of the concert. They were taking video like of themselves, like singing.
I do see that quite a bit too.
Yeah, it was so funny. Like it was sweet. Like I think it's really cute that was like part of what they wanted to commemorate. But I also just kind of feel like you should not let your phone hinder being in the moment because you're only going to be in that atmosphere once.
Yeah.
And then never again. So you should enjoy it. But I do think it's interesting that I think that the younger generation probably would be inherently against this. And that's interesting to me because we hear so much, we've heard it quite a few times recently on this show that the reason Gen Z doesn't like to do very much like in concert settings or even in club settings is because they're so paranoid about getting filmed in public and being labeled as cringe. So if you take away the cell phone aspect from a concert, then maybe they would all just like loosen up and have a little bit more fun,
Yeah. Maybe they should stop doing that to other people.
I think so too. They reaped what they sowed for sure.
Right? I know. I'm like, y'all started this trend.
Yeah, it is so funny that they talk about how anxious it makes them to be filmed, but then they're filming anyway.
I'll tell you what, that's cringe.
In contrast, like, do you guys remember when we used to go out? It's like, and you would just dump the entire like context of your memory stick onto Facebook.
Yep.
Oh,
and not a care in the world.
The title of the album was always some like cryptic song lyric. And it's just pictures of you and blurry pictures of you and your friends being stupid at a bar.
Right. And everyone's like, tag me in that. We would never know.
Yeah. And even today, these photos you take at concerts or videos, rarely do they turn out good. They probably sound bad. They look bad because you're zooming in like 20x, which you're really not even, you're like digitally zooming in. So it's all grainy. This has been my experience. I look back on my own concert photos and videos, and out of like 50, I can maybe find 3 or 4. I'm like, okay, that could go on the grid. But most of these photos are not good in the moment. The lighting's bad. Your phone can't adjust. They're kind of not worth it. Even though in the moment it's like, oh yeah, I definitely need to do this. And these all are going to turn out great, but they don't. As an aside, I was supposed to see Kelly Clarkson this weekend. She was opening up a new residency, the Studio Sessions here in Vegas. And some of you may have seen, she canceled her opening weekend 90 minutes before the opening show was supposed to take place. I wasn't seeing that show. I was going to see the next night, but that was a bummer. And I feel for people when their concerts get canceled, especially if you flew in. I was seeing some stories. Y'all might remember a year or two ago now, Adele canceled some shows. People were bawling. Adele like called a couple on the phone and like sent them free merch and stuff. People were crying. I saw over Kelly Clarkson being canceled. Imagine flying out anywhere and your show gets canceled with 90 minutes to spare. It's a huge bummer. I've actually been there myself with Springsteen shows, not that close to showtime, but
I think about that a lot more now too. And we covered this as well on the show in the past, but like the boom in like in concert tourism.
Yeah.
And it seems exciting, but like every time you do that, you're taking a risk.
So you got to make some other plans. Luckily in Vegas, there's no shortage of other shows you could go see. Like New Kids on the Block is here right now. Backstreet Boys is going to be here soon at Sphere. You can go see Bruno Mars and Silk Sonic. You just have to get rid of your phone. No shortage of activities here. But yeah, I sometimes use concerts as an excuse to also travel. So that is a good way to buy yourself, let's call it insurance, in case the band or singer does end up having to cancel.
Yeah.
Still a huge bummer.
Yeah. Is she rescheduling? Are you going to be able to see her
I think so.
later?
It's one of those things where they say it's been postponed, so that way they don't have to
Okay.
refund you the money until they figure out when they're actually going to
Right.
move these dates. That part's annoying because I kind of just want my money
Yeah.
back. I'll decide later when we're going to.
Right. Because they're just
Yeah.
holding your money.
Yeah. We were
Yeah.
actually supposed to see her with my friend's mom who was in town this week. So she's been definitely
Oh,
robbed
man.
of the Kelly Clarkson experience.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to Sabrina Carpenter for a minute here, since we were talking about her, we also wanted to talk about the other reason she's in the news right now. And it's specifically controversy surrounding the cover of her forthcoming album, Man's Best Friend, which is due out late in August. This album got a lot of buzz. Some not great. Parts of the internet really had issues with how she chose to depict herself on the cover. They were calling it disgusting, disturbing, and not very empowering image for women. On the flip side, others were defending her, saying that the album art is meant to hold a double meaning and it's not about being submissive at all. Have you guys had a chance to see the cover for this album?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were your initial reactions?
I didn't really care if I'm being really honest with you, because I think my first assumption with something like this that is clearly intended to be a provocative image is that there is probably more to it than maybe meets the eye initially. And I mean, I'm not a huge Sabrina Carpenter fan, but it really seems like she caters to her fan base of like the girls, the gays, and the theys. And she doesn't have like a lot great to say about straight men. So it does make me wonder if she was maybe trying to push a boundary in a different way that will become more clear once the album is out. But yeah, people were definitely jumping to a lot of conclusions about this. The cover basically depicts Sabrina crawling on all fours on her hands and knees with presumably a man in a suit holding her hair, kind of like you would hold a leash for a dog. And of course, with the title of the album, Man's Best Friend, like we are clearly going for provocative imagery here. I don't know what the full story is yet.
Yeah, I saw it too. I was surprised by it, but didn't really think too much further into it. I will say we have discussed over the years how vinyl has grown again in popularity because people like displaying this stuff, and maybe that's one of the thoughts with creating some album art like this. It is something to be displayed in the house of somebody who is okay with this type of thing, of course, this type of photo. It gets attention. It does get people talking. It's hard to sell albums in the year 2025. We're in a single world and a touring world. It's not really about the album anymore. And maybe one of the goals here was just to get people talking.
Yeah, I just think that you have to look at her discography too, or like her, even like if you aren't familiar with her discography, you probably heard some of her bigger radio singles for sure at this point. We talked before too about how people were convinced that Spotify was pushing espresso onto them in a way that they were like not asking for. But I just think that like a lot of her lyrics are very tongue in cheek. There's a lot of double meaning in there. Even if you look at Man-Child, which is the lead single off of this album, to Laura's point, it's not about like how she's obsessed with straight men. It's literally about how men are trash, So I think that like you have to take that into the context of a cover like this as well. Like, so yeah, that would be like where I stand on it. I think she's just having fun, and it, even if it is provocative to some people, it does fall in line with her overall image as an artist, I guess you could say, especially in relation to the music that she writes, which a lot of it is very tongue in cheek, and there's a lot of fun play on words, and some of it is provocative. So
I guess we should also see what the full album is, right?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that an important factor here too? What is the message
Mhm.
she's trying to say overall in the album? And I guess she's
agree.
released a single or two so far, but it's not reflective of the whole album.
I've definitely seen some people theorizing that maybe later on, or maybe in like the little album book, they will have a full expanded image of the image that currently crops out the identity of the person who's holding Sabrina's hair. So people are thinking that maybe there'll be some kind of surprise with that. Like maybe it's actually Sabrina holding
That'd
her
be
own
funny.
hair, right? So there could be more to it. And
Or it's like mirrored, and on the flip side, Sabrina's like ready to shoot this guy or something.
yeah, or something like that, right? But I mean, definitely it got people talking online, and it created a lot of debate about like, is it feminism? And people had strong opinions on both sides of that question. I tend to agree with you that we should just kind of wait and see what the full product is before we ultimately judge it. But yeah, I think I tend to agree. I think it was something that was kind of meant to create a stir.
And it worked.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Well, we will discuss one more controversial item after the break. Lots of controversy today. We'll be right back. So I was flipping through Instagram last week, and I saw a story that was kind of rubbing me the wrong way. A San Francisco bookstore called The Booksmith has stopped selling the Harry Potter books in store after JK Rowling said she'd be creating what she's calling a women's fund. And according to the site for this women's fund, the JK Rowling Women's Fund offers legal funding support to individuals and organizations fighting to retain women's sex-based rights in the workplace, in public life, and in protected female spaces. It provides women with the means and confidence to bring to justice cases that make legal precedents, force policy change, and make positive contributions to women's lives in the future. End quote. JK Rowling also said she'd be using her own money for this fund, and that part alone set off a lot of people because they believe she'll be using this women's fund to support many of her transphobic causes, which is absolutely valid and definitely what is going on here, especially when you read what I just did about the women's fund. But a couple things get me about this story. First of all, people are acting like this is some sort of revelation that JK Rowling would be using her own money for this women's fund or any other campaign that she is funding, as if she's been pulling this money out of thin air with Harry Potter's wand. And on a related note, the bookstore in question, The Booksmith, said, in May of 2025, author JK Rowling publicly committed to using her private wealth from the Harry Potter series to develop this women's fund, an organization dedicated to removing transgender rights in the workplace, in public life, and in protected female spaces. With this announcement, we've decided to stop carrying her books. We don't know exactly what her women's fund will entail, but we know that we aren't going to be a part of it. A lot of people were applauding the Booksmith's move, and this is the other part that rubs me the wrong way. In my opinion, you cannot be against the banned book movement and also in support of this. And my concern is that removing books from any bookstore by the bookseller because they don't agree with the opinions of the author is a very slippery slope. It would be one thing if Harry Potter himself was suddenly being transphobic in the story, but the books are not inherently bad. And in fact, studies have shown that this series has taught children empathy.
So my feeling is, especially for like an independent bookseller, I think that they can choose to sell or not sell whatever they want. I don't personally have a dog in that fight, because especially with something like Harry Potter, if one independent bookstore isn't carrying it and I'm like jonesing for Harry Potter, which why would I need another copy of that? I have 8 million. I could go around the corner to Barnes and Noble and just pick one up. From that perspective, I think it's about the bookseller doing what feels right to them to do. However, and I have a feeling we're going to get into some of this in a minute, so I won't jump ahead. What I do take issue with is hypocrisy and virtue signaling, which is part of this story.
So what Laura is talking about here is that, first of all, you can actually still get the Harry Potter books through the Booksmith's website. I went and looked. It's not in stock, but it says available to ship in 1 to 5 business days. Number 2, you can go to the same bookseller's website where you can buy Harry Potter through their online portal. You can get books by Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, Mike Pence, people who are actively trying to roll back LGBTQ rights. So why are we so focused on Harry Potter and JK Rowling? And why do you have to put a message in your bookstore? Why do you have to create a page on your website dedicated to this news? Why not just remove the books and let it go? And if anybody asks you in store, say, we have chosen not to sell them because of her views, and leave it at that. Why make a grand announcement about it? It seems like there is some grandstanding going on.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, it just, like Laura was saying, it feels performative for sure, especially if they're not going to remove books from other problematic authors, whether that's children's authors or political figures. There are plenty of children's authors aside from JK Rowling who also were terrible people. So you better be removing those books too. Dr. Seuss, Roald Dahl is also being brought up in the chat as well. I mean, yeah, you got to put your money where your mouth is if you're going to stand on business like this. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Totally agreed.
And I just, seeing this story on Instagram a couple of weeks ago and then looking at the comments, or all these applaud emojis. Oh, great job. It's like, if the tables were turned here and a Republican bookseller was removing books by Barack Obama or Michelle Obama from their shelves because this bookseller didn't like where he donated money to, would you also be in favor of that or okay with this notion? I don't think people would be. I think we would be enraged, just like we are by cancel culture and the banned books movement. This is dangerous to me. I don't think this should be applauded.
Mm-hmm. It's also, again, to your point, it's not even like they're not selling it at all. They're still able to make a profit off of it if you want to buy it from their website.
Yeah.
So what's the point? Like, what are they really applauding? They're still profiting and lining JK Rowling's pockets every time somebody buys it off their website, or every time somebody comes into the store and says, we actually don't carry that in store, but we can order it for you.
Right. People are applauding getting her. We got her, y'all.
But
we're moving her books.
But you didn't. Like,
yeah, you didn't.
You are not. I'm sorry. No one is going to be able to move the needle monetarily to a point to get her to stop spewing her shitty views on Twitter.
Yeah.
She's just not going to stop and doing stuff. I think heavy virtue signaling with a veneer of hypocrisy actually kind of makes it worse, because that's the kind of shit that makes her double down and go on these like crazy ass like tweet thread sprees.
Yeah. My other thing is like setting aside, the like the theme park, which is like an ongoing source of income, right? Like, if you're just looking at the books, because this is what it's being called into play here. I hate to say this because, I don't want to discourage people from protesting, but she's already made her millions off of that series. Probably 10 times over
at this point. Yeah.
And if you don't think that she's like, I mean, at that point, it's like her millions her fortune is passive income that just is making money on its own due to probably really good investments. So whether or not people stop buying these books every once in a while is not really going to make a big difference in her bottom line. Unfortunately, she's always going to have the funds to be a shitty person. And that really doesn't change whether everybody stops going to the theme park, everybody stops buying new books, everybody stops buying the movies, everybody decides to boycott this new TV show. It doesn't change the fact that she's going to be rich for her entire life.
Right.
Sorry to say.
Needless to say, we hate all of her views on trans people and how she's turned into a bully and the woman that she is today. We also hate when people are deciding to remove books on the basis of the author's personal opinions. And I think I think the left is kind of a mess on this issue too, because Laura, you mentioned Barnes & Noble a few minutes ago. Have you been into a Barnes & Noble lately? There's a giant wall dedicated to Harry Potter. I encourage you to go look at this giant Harry Potter wall that all the Barnes & Nobles have. Tons of merchandise, the books, obviously.
Of course they do.
Wands, Umbridge plate set I saw the other day. Where is the backlash around a place like Barnes & Noble selling so much Harry Potter merchandise? I bet a lot of these people who are hating JK Rowling and saying, don't buy the books, go to the theme parks, they're still buying books at Barnes & Noble. They're profiting off of Harry Potter bigly in the year 2025.
Yeah, that's the thing people forget is like, and I think, Pam, you were alluding to this earlier, but like, okay, if you want to boycott the TV show, that's fine. But are you not gonna have HBO Max? And I mean, respect. Right. Like, if you're like, yeah, you know what? I do not want any money funneled to her whatsoever. I will literally not spend money on anything knowingly if she gets a kickback from it. Total respect. But I think sometimes people, when they get on the virtue signaling train and there's like moral superiority Olympics, it can become this like really quick tit for tat where it's like, well, I'm like I'm a little more righteous than you because I do this extra thing that you don't do.
Or at worst, you don't support trans rights because you are still, XYZ, which is inherently wrong. And listen, like I do this too. I think it's everybody's personal choice where they want to spend their hard-earned money and where they want that money to go towards. Again, like if it feels right in your heart for you to not do these things, that's fine. But I also think that we have to be realistic. And if you're really trying to make a change, I think there are better ways to utilize your time and also your money into combating all of this that she's, standing for now.
Yeah,
I agree.
I prefer less of the armchair activism and more of the going out and volunteering, going out and do something, make a donation if you want.
Or actively like supporting, like showing up for your trans friends.
Yeah.
And neighbors and family members, if and when possible.
I hate to say this, but when it comes to this battle against JK Rowling, we have lost and we're going to continue losing. Like there's no silencing her. There's no combating her. Like we're talking about here. Yeah, you can stop buying butterbeers at the theme park and buying the books and all that. But it's not going to make a difference. Harry Potter is going to be in our lives, our pop culture lives. It will be present for the rest of our lives. Period. It is another Star Wars. It's here to stay. Unless the Harry Potter show bombs beyond all belief, and there's no reason, in my opinion, to think that, Harry Potter is here to stay forever.
And listen, to that point, I understand that like, unfortunately, because of what she stands for now, it has completely ruined it for some people. But I also think that like, it's not wrong to like, let your children read those books, because setting aside who she is and whether she set out to do this or not, she unfortunately did raise a generation of people that by far and more often than like the small amount of hateful people that are still in fandom are fighting for good stuff. I just think about like,
look at it.
Like, for example, like the Harry Potter Alliance, which was like big when we were younger and stuff like that. And look at how many good people came out of just being fans of this book growing up on this series. Like it did more good than it did bad. And I think sometimes we have to remember that regardless of whether that was her intent or not, she ended up raising a generation of people that by far and large are standing up for what's right. And we're seeing that as a result of people boycotting or expressing these hurt opinions or staying in fandom despite that, to show people that are in the minority, that there are still people in fandom that care about them and will fight to protect their rights. So.
Yeah, and I've seen the point raised, and I'm not saying this is a reason to continue supporting JK Rowling or Harry Potter, but I have seen it raised that JK Rowling has also done a lot of good in the world with charitable contributions outside of things like this women's fund. You know, she has the Lumos organization, which is doing important work. She probably donates to a lot of causes she doesn't post about, I would assume. Any good celebrity is probably quietly donating to a lot of good causes that we would agree with. So it's a very tricky situation. I just don't want to see books removed.
Yeah. I mean, again, if it's an independent bookstore, I think they get to decide what they stock, right? If it's like a big, chain, obviously that's a different circumstance, right? But if it's a mom and pop shop, independently owned, I mean, if you don't want to sell Harry Potter, don't sell Harry Potter. But that doesn't mean just sell Harry Potter through your website.
Right.
Like, again, you're not doing anything if you do it that way.
Yeah. So I did also want to share an alternate perspective because the three of us seem pretty aligned on this. When I did post about this on Instagram, one of our listeners, Jacob, actually replied to my comment. And I will say I got at least more people supporting what I was saying versus people who weren't supporting what I was saying, but maybe those people who are on the opposite side of me just weren't coming forward. But Jacob did disagree with me, and Jacob said banned books are banned because people don't like the content within the books. Harry Potter isn't being sold because we shouldn't be supporting a disgusting bigot who is actively trying to hurt innocent people. Booksellers have free reign to decide which books they do or do not carry. As having worked for one for a considerable amount of time, they choose every book that comes into their shop, so they are already doing this all the time and have every right to. Banning books in schools and libraries, on the other hand, is not something that should happen. Libraries and schools are, for the most part, government entities and are not supposed to let personal bias dictate what their catalogs hold. Do a majority of libraries and some schools have Mein Kampf available for checkout? Yes. Do a lot of booksellers sell it? No. Is the author a bigot, bully, etc., whose book doesn't do much beyond perpetuate heinous thinking? Yes. Same thing, says Jacob. End quote. So I appreciated the perspective, especially from somebody who worked in a bookstore. I just wanted to get that out there because I'm sure some of our listeners won't agree with what we're saying today.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point about libraries. I mean, libraries are accessible to everybody that is within their vicinities. And bookstores are only accessible to people that have money, right? Like you can go in and browse, but you can't probably can't sit there and read a whole book. Someone might be like, hey, you're going to buy that, but nobody's going to stop you from doing that at a library. So I do think that's an important distinction.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do worry that something like this, I haven't really seen right-wing circles pick this up much, this bookseller removing Harry Potter. But I do worry if this is going to be a give an inch, take a mile type of thing where they go even further and harder because of what one bookstore in San Francisco does. I could see this being a talking point for Trump, this type of activity. So,
yeah. And I think and I think I expressed this to y'all when we were planning for this episode, but stuff like this happening on the left does frustrate me because it's these exact kinds of examples that get overgeneralized onto the rest of us and allow that, caricature of the crazy liberal, the liberal mob. And it's like, no, most people have the capacity for nuanced thought, right? Like it's, yeah.
And we're trying to inject some nuance here by also giving the full picture about this bookstore. Still selling the books online, going out of their way to make an announcement about it, selling books by Trump and Pence and Bannon. I'm sure there's plenty of other right-wing people whose books they sell, and those people actively use their money too to fight progress in LGBTQ rights. So it's they're
in a better position of power than JK Rowling is, which should be even more terrifying because they're lawmakers. All she can do is fund people, but they can actually enact change, which is even more terrifying.
The Booksmith is an American business in San Francisco, California, paying federal taxes to Donald Trump. I just want some consistency. Anyway, we'll
Agreed.
leave it there. Listeners, please leave some feedback if you have any thoughts or feelings on this topic. We probably will do a listener feedback centric episode in the weeks ahead. So send in that feedback now. You can email millennialshow@gmail.com. You can use the contact form on millennialshow.com. You can leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube or DM us on social. We're everywhere. This show is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/millennial to support us for as little as $5 a month, and you can get instant access to perks like After Dark. This week, we have a neighborly gossip edition of After Dark. I have a good update on some news I brought y'all a few weeks ago.
Oh,
I
okay.
confronted my fears. I put on my
excited to
courage,
hear.
my hat of courage. Yes. You can also get access to ad-free episodes of Millennial. You'll get access to our live streams and a lot more. And when you become a pal, you'll be able to listen to all of our bonus audio content right within your favorite podcast app.
Visit patreon.com/millennial and get started today with a 7-day free trial to check out all of our bonus content, including After Dark. And annual subscription discounts are also available.
Other ways to support us include visiting shop.millennialshow.com, where you can pick up official show gear. You can also tell a fellow millennial about the show, and also make sure you're following us in your favorite podcast app.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, we would appreciate a review in your favorite podcast app. Time for some recommendations. Summer movie season is in full swing. I saw Jurassic World Rebirth, and that is my recommendation this week. One reason I wanted to recommend this is there was that trilogy of Jurassic World movies over the last, 5 to 7 years. I liked that first one, did not like the sequel and threequel. I actively hated Jurassic World 2 and 3, but this new one, Rebirth, with a new cast and is a bit of a reboot, was good. I really enjoyed it. I was pleasantly surprised. And people are putting this up there in their top 4-ish Jurassic Parks of all time.
Okay.
So that was one
pretty
reason that I was interested in seeing it. Yeah. So I would definitely recommend it. If you felt burned by the previous Jurassic World movies, give Rebirth a shot anyway.
I'm going to recommend Ironheart on Disney Plus. So this is actually a little bit of a surprise recommendation for me because honestly, that show on Disney Plus, it wasn't the only show that suffered this treatment, but it was a show that was conceived around the time in these last few years when Marvel has been kind of shitting the bed and in terms of their movies and TV shows. So because a lot of stuff from that period came out and sucked, a lot of us didn't have much hope for Ironheart, but it actually had it genuinely had a lot of heart. And I feel like it sounds hokey to say that, but it really did. And I'll also be honest, the writing ain't great, but the overall story is very cool. And there are some really big moments that are great fan payoff if you weren't expecting them, which I wasn't because I really hadn't paid much attention before I got into this. So it's a good watch.
I'm glad you brought this up because I started it over the 4th of July weekend and I'm really enjoying it more than I thought I was going to.
Same. That was the thing. We sat down and watched the first episode. We were like, okay, let's check this out. Right. And we did. And we were like, that is not what I thought it was going to be.
This is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm about halfway through. So I'm also enjoying it.
Awesome.
And since we're talking about San Francisco bookstores, and this is a strange area of expertise for me, I wanted to recommend Green Apple Books if you happen to be visiting San Francisco for whatever reason. It's not really in the downtown area, so you would have to make the effort to kind of get out of there, but it's a good excuse to visit a neighborhood that's not downtown, which a lot of people don't do when they come into the city. But yeah, it's great. It's used and new, and they also have a music section too with used record stores. It's one of those like tiny looking bookstores that also has lots of nooks and crannies and layers and stuff like that. So it's really easy to get lost in there, and you can really spend a couple hours just hanging out if you like to peruse bookstores. It's probably my favorite bookstore in the city. So highly recommend going to Green Apple if you visit. And as a bonus, you should also walk across the street and grab a piece of cake from Schubert's Bakery.
Ooh.
So make a nice little afternoon of it.
All right. After Dark starts in a moment for patrons and Apple Podcast subscribers. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.